हेलो एंड वेलकम एवरीवन टू द डेली न्यूज एनालिसिस ऑफ 12th ऑफ फरवरी 2024। तो आज की इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल देखते हैं। पहला जो आर्टिकल है, डायरेक्ट टैक्स किटी पिक्स अप रेस पेस अप टू 20.25% by February 10, a privileged strategic partnership without a Gulf, decoding India's economic realities. Then the parent patterns of global warming are more important than its levels. Brumation winter is coming for reptiles. So this one is our first article, that is direct tax kitty picks up pace of 20.25% by Feb 10. India's net direct tax collection picked up pace over the past month to rise 20.25% year on year by February 10 compared to a 19.4% uptick in the same date in January. Shows data released by the Finance Ministry on Sunday. Growth in the personal income tax (PTI) revenues continues to outstrip corporate income tax with a 26.91% uptick in net PIT collections vis-a-vis a 13.6% rise in CIT inflows so far this year from 14.7 lakh crore on January 10. Net direct tax collection that are calculated by deducting refunds from the gross tax inflows had hit 15.6 lakh crore rupees by Saturday, making up 80.23% of the revised estimates for the direct taxes for this year. Higher expectations. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in her interim budget for 24-25 had raised her hopes for the direct tax kitty for this year, pegging revised estimates at 19.5 lakh crore rupees from the 18.23 lakh crore originally estimated for 23-24. We are quite hopeful of meeting the revised estimates for the current years, as the asking rate of is 17% growth for the next 2 months, but we do not know how advanced tax will come through. So let us see how much we are able to achieve, because it is the product of the collection which will be made in month of February and March, and refunds which will be issued. Central Board of Direct Taxes Chairperson Nitin Gupta told The Hindu last week the provisional figures of direct tax collections continue to register steady growth. Direct tax collections up to February 10, 2024 shows that the gross collection are at the 18.38 lakh crore, which is 17.30 higher than percent higher than the gross collection for the corresponding period of last year, the ministry said in a statement. Refunds amounting to 2.77 lakh crore rupees have been issued between April 1, 23 and February 10, 24. It added, we are issuing refunds and intend to keep issuing refund as they are arise. So let us see, every year we are seeing refunds rising. The year before last it was 2.25 lakh crore rupees, and last year it rose to 3.07 lakh crore. Mr. Gupta said, adding that the board was also trying to process and give quick efforts to appellate orders on the tax demands, which are likely to pick up in remaining period of this financial year. Prior to refund, gross revenue collection from corporate income tax were 9.2% higher than a year ago, while revenue from personal income tax were up to 25.7% growth in PIT collection when combined with the securities transaction tax receipts stood at 25.97% at the gross levels, while it was 27.2% after making refund adjustment. As of January 10, the net growth in CIT collection was 12.37%, while PIT revenues excluding STT receipt were up to 27.26%. The next article है a privileged strategic partnership without a golf. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is scheduled to pay an official visit to United Arab Emirates UAE from the February 13, 14, 2024, which will include inaugurating a temple built by the Bucha Sanvasi Sri Akshar Purushottam Swaminarayan Sastha in Abu Dhabi. This is Mr. Modi's seventh visit to UAE since 2015 and the third in the last 8 months. In this short duration, India's relationship with UAE has evolved into becoming one of the most prominent bilateral relationships for New Delhi. Not only has the UAE become India's strategic partner, but it has also become one of the most important linchpins of the India's engagement in the Gulf region. There is a close report between the President of UAE Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and Mr. Modi. The BAPS temple is which is built on 27-acre plot of land donated by the UAE President will be the second big Hindu temple to be inaugurated in the UAE in the recent year. The first being the Hindu temple in Dubai opened in October 2022. Mr. Modi will also address the World Government Summit and on February 14 in Dubai as the guest of honor. The pillars of ties. The India UAE story, however, goes beyond temples, faith or signing of strategic partnership. This special relationship was evident when the UAE president was felicitated in a roadshow when he was in Gandhinagar in January this year as the chief guest of the 10th Vibrant Gujarat Summit. The convergence of ideas on global climate issues too was clear when Mr. Modi was in Dubai for COP28 climate summit. Both India and UAE co-launched the Global Green Credit Initiatives. Another special and strong pillar is the economic partnership. Bilateral trade grew to $85 billion in 22-23, making the UAE India's third largest trading partner and India's second largest exporter designation. The UAE is also the fourth largest overall investor in India. The India UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement signed on February 18, 2022 in a record time of 88 days aims to increase trade in services to $115 billion in 5 years. On February 1, 2024, the Indian government also approved the signing and ratification of a bilateral investment treaty with the UAE, which could significantly boost bilateral economic engagement, especially manufacturing and foreign indirect investment. Fintech is yet another area of mutual convergence. The RuPay card, a key component of India's digital public infrastructure, is accepted in the UAE since August 2019, while from July 23 the rupee was being accepted for transaction at Dubai's airport. India and the UAE also operationalized a rupee dirham settlement system when in August 23 the Indian Oil Corporation made a rupee payment to Abu Dhabi National Oil Company for crude oil imports. Energy security. The UAE is also India's trusted partner in energy security, being the only nation from the region which has strategic oil reserves stored in India. An agreement was signed in Indian Strategic Petroleum Reversed Limited (ISPRL) and the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company to invest in the strategic crude oil storage facility in Mangaluru with an initial investment of $400 million. Defense and security operations and people-to-people ties too are critical cogs in the relationship. Both countries have often gone out of their ways to make expectations for each other. When the 2019 ET invited India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj as a keynote speaker guest of honor country despite protest from some nations including Pakistan. Earlier in 2018, India was the great guest of honor country at the Abu Dhabi Festival, the UAE's annual cultural festival. During his visit to the UAE in August 2019, Mr. Modi was conferred the UAE's top civilian honor, the Order of Zayed Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, and the Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade in Delhi in January 2017. The UAE was one of the few nations specially invited for the G20 summit in September 23. Under India's G20 presidency, the IIT Delhi Abu Dhabi campus has been established and the UAE opened a consulate in Hyderabad in June 23. Strategic ties within the region, both countries are in close coordination as part of the number of important groupings such as the I2U2 or West Asian Quad comprising Israel, India, and United States and UAE. The UAE is also part of the Indian Middle East Europe Economic Corridor IMEEC infrastructure project that was signed during the G20 summit in Delhi. The corridor aims to connect India to Europe across the Arabian Peninsula and is a potential rival to China's Belt and Road initiatives. The visit also comes at a critical time with the war in Gaza involving the region. The visit will provide the two leaders an opportunity to confer on this very critical issue. India has numerous strategic partnership, more convergence and mutual respect at all levels than the one with the UAE. There are few major issues of divergence, which is something unique even among the best of friendly nations. While India recognizes and values the UAE's role in the region, the UAE too in the cognizant of the global leadership role that India is set to acquire. Both countries recognize that this privileged strategic partnership is only set to grow stronger in the years ahead. Then next article decoding India's economic realities. With BJP-led government excluding overconfidence on the state of economy, the interim budget presented earlier this month has shifted focus to fiscal consolidations. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has projected that the fiscal deficit, which was expanded to 9.2% of GDP in 2020-21 to deal with the pandemic induced recessions, would be brought down to 5.8% by the end of the current financial year and 5.1% by next year to reach the targeted 4.5% of GDP by 25-26. The interim budget signals a significant cutback in public expenditure, slashing effective capital expenditure by 1 lakh crore rupees and reducing welfare and subsidy allocation despite a nominal GDP growth of 9% down from the previous year's 10.5%. The government faces challenges with a slowdown in economic activity. Real GDP growth stands at 7.3% above last year's 7.2%, while the IMF questions the accuracy of official growth estimates, recommending statistical upgrade. The fiscal situation is complicated by rising debt liabilities, making for a making a formal withdrawal of post-pandemic simulations stimulus in the interim budget. Ahead to this is the project of a slowdown in economic activity regarding which the government seems to be in denial despite the nominal GDP growth rate falling to 9% in the current year from 16% last year. Real GDP growth at constant price has been estimated at 7.3%. Advanced estimates slightly above 7.2% registered last year, implying that the value of GDP deflector, which should correspond with the retail inflation rate, has fallen below 2% in 23-24 official data. On the other hand, this shows the monthly average of consumer price index. A consumer price index CPI combined at 5.5% for the 23-24. This anomaly has once again revived the debate over the accuracy of official growth estimates. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) in its latest staff report on India, November 23, has pointed out several defects and deficiencies in real sector data, particularly that in national account employment and price, recommending an upgradation and expansion of official statistics. It is noteworthy that in its January 24 upgrade of the World Economic Outlook, the IMF has projected India's real GDP growth as the 6.7% for 23-24 and 6.5% for 24-25, reflecting a deceleration of economic activity, budget and public finance. The finance ministry has sought to divert attention from this debate over the present direction of a challenge in economic activity by presenting a white paper in parliament on the past 20 years. The white paper alleges that United Progressive Alliance had left behind a deeply damaged economic marked by the governance, economic and fiscal crisis in 2014, which is claimed to have turned around and rebuilt from its foundation in the past 10 years by the National Democratic Alliance's regime. The evidence presented in support of this macroeconomic narrative, however, is a conclusion of cherry-picked data that half-truth, evasion, and counterfaction fluctuation assertion over the past 20 years fiscal trends show no clear pattern between UPA and NDA regime. See table 1. NDA 1 reduces expenditure as a percentage of GDP, which NDA 2 increased spending significantly post-pandemic. NDA 2's expenditure record is mixed compared to UPA with improvement in certain areas but declines in others. The NDA 1 government has reduced expenditure relative to GDP on most major heads compared to the UPA regime, including capex, subsidies, defense, education, and rural development. India too increased the outlays on those heads significantly vis-a-vis NDA one. However, the expenditure record of the NDA two government vis-a-vis the UPA era remained mixed. Outlays on the capex, food subsidy, agriculture, and urban and rural development improved, while outlays on education, defense, and subsidies on fuel and fertilizer fell as percent of GDP. Health expenditure as a share of GDP saw no change at all between the UPA and NDA rule despite the pandemic. Over the revenue front, gross tax revenues in GDP showed minor improvement during the NDA rule compared to UPS, but non-tax revenues deteriorated overall. There was a decline in the center's revenue deficit as a share of GDP, partly due to the increase in the state's share in the central tax following the implementation of 14th Finance Commission recommendation. India's revenue mobilization strategy revolved around increasing indirect tax collection on one hand through GST rollout and levying high excise duties on income tax based on the other. Central Board of Direct Tax (CBDT) data show that the number of individual income taxpayers with positive tax payments increased from 1.25 crore in 2012 to 13 assessment years to 2.08 crore in 21-22. The average tax paid for individual income taxpayer more than doubled from 91,200 to 2.03 lakh in 21-22. This raised income tax revenues from UPA year's annual average of around 2% of GDP to 2.3% under the NDA 1 and 2.9% during NDA 2. In sharp contrast, however, corporate tax collection fell as a share of GDP from the UPA era average of 3.5% of GDP to 3.3% under NDA 1 and further to 2.8% under NDA 2. Aggregate income tax collection are projected to surpass corrective corporative tax collection by over 1.13 lakh crore rupees in 24-25 CBD data show the number of companies paying positive taxes rising from 3.45 lakh in 2012 and 13 assessment years to 4.57 lakh in 21-22 assessment years. Yet data from the statement on revenue impact of incentives under the central tax system annexed with the received budget show that the effective corporate tax rate, which inclusive of a dividend distribution tax, had risen from 24.2% in 2012 to 2012-13 to 30.4% in 2018-19, had fallen sharply to 22.2% in 2021. The withdrawal of the dividend distribution tax and sharp reduction in the corporate tax rate through the new tax regime introduced in 2019-20 have led to massive revenue losses under the NDA-2 government, whose estimate the government has suppressed till date such a revenue mobilization strategy while transferring income from the poor through enhanced indirect taxes and middle classes through income taxes to profit-making corporate sector. Besides exacerbating income inequality, has also failed to generate adequate revenues at a time when public expenditure was being enhanced under the NDA-2 following the onset of the pandemic and function recessions. As a result, the revenue deficit has eventually bloated to an average of 4.3%, average at 6.6%, raising the central government's debt from 52% of GDP at the end of the UPA role and around 50% under NDA-1 to current levels of 58%. Annual interest expenditure has also risen from the low of 3.0% earlier to 3.6% of the GDP in current periods, which the government is now trying to reckon with by slashing capex subsidies and welfare expenditure in the interim budget. It is also noteworthy that despite the enhanced levels of resource transferred to the states in the past 10 years, combined debt of state government have grown faster than that of the center under the NDA rule than the UPA era. This underlines the inadequacy of current levels of fiscal transfer to the states given their expanding expenditure commitments. The next article is the patterns of global warming are more important than its levels. Many warming records were broken in 23, along with the climate disasters such as the wildfire, cyclones, drought, and floods. In this time, the focus of the public narratives, often with the participation of scientists, has often been on whether we crossed the magical warming threshold of 1.5 degrees centigrade. The best estimates derived from data recorded by the instruments say the planet is just under the threshold, but did we really cross the 1.5 degree centigrade threshold in 2023? Before we discuss the answer, let's remember that 1.5 degree centigrade is not a scientific threshold. It becomes enshrined in Paris Agreement after intense negotiations by member countries of the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change (UNFCCC). But it's not a round number by accident. It comes from a figure to 2 degrees centigrade. Economic politicians found easier to aim at it in an 1990s, measuring the crossing. Now, a new study published on February 5 in Nature has added fuel to the fire of the threshold crossing controversy based on estimates of warming from paleothermal Metri, scientists from Australia and US have said that the Earth's surface had already warmed by more than 1.5 degrees centigrade on average over the pre-industrial air levels. A major caveat of the study is that the scientists have collected warming data from only the one location and have extrapolated it to be indicative of the global mean temperature trend. They said these so-called paleoproxies constitute an emerging technique that uses chemical evidence stored to various organic matters such as coral stalactites and stalagmites to approximate the temperature at some point in the past, but just as insightful as this chemical evidence can be, we should remember that it is still only indirect evidence of temperature changes with respect to a baseline temperature. The evidence cannot measure the actual river temperature since paleoproxies don't directly measure the temperature. We call them proxies of past temperatures deviations. The paleo denotes the past of researchers carefully calibrate the various chemical compounds assimilated by some species into their biogenic materials such as calcium carbonate or chalk in modernity to establish the relationship between these chemicals and the prevailing local temperature. When such a biogenic material from the past is found, scientists can piece together when the biogenic material was deposited using the quality of the certain isotopes that decay at a steady rate over time. They then study the assimilated chemicals to deduce the temperature deviation during that time period. The results are very local temperature anomaly estimates from the past, so they cannot be basis for same scientifically robust claims about tiny deviation of past temperature from instrumental records. No explanation for patterns. Next, and let's examine the significance of crossing the 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold. The explosions that made these claims, article headlines, etc., do not really offer any clear explanations of why such explanation warming occurred or how it can explain some location specific disaster. Even worse, no one has been able to fully explain the patterns of warming associated with this threshold exceedance or in fact the pattern of any level of global warming. This is important because warming patterns matters the most of for our ability to manage the disaster associated with the global warming. Even amount and the distribution of 23 monsoon had not been explained yet. It is unclear how the combination of El Nino, its unusual patterns and global warming conspired together to produce monsoon India. Experience note also that the Indian subcontinent experienced significant cooling during 2023. We will be ignoring the lessons we have learned from various El Ninos and their impacts on the global warming and on the monsoon if we continue to focus on the extent of global warming rather than its spatial variation and how they evolve. El Nino is a warming paradigm. The tropical Pacific Ocean keeping keeps soaking up heat during normal and La Nina years and belches it out in El Nino year. This causes a mini global warming with the consequence at a distant locations. The so-called teleconnections. The latter the FUAT tells us that the patterns of warming really matters depending on whether the warming due to El Nino is in the Eastern Pacific Ocean or close to international deadline. The impact on the monsoon and other part of the world can be very different, and added difficulty is that the El Nino teleconnections themselves also modify the warming pattern. As a result, droughts can have a stronger feedback that affect temperature than flood. In many instances, the massive deluxe that California is experiencing this winter are driven by El Nino but likely amplified by global warming. The amount of rain and snow will subsequently feed back to the local and global temperature. These same process work in the global warming regime as well as human-made greenhouse gases initiatives. The warming pattern in the amplified in Arctic and over the desert region of the Middle East, but damped over the Eastern Pacific and Northern Atlantic Ocean. These local warmings and codings and their magnitudes determine the net effect of natural variability and global warming in the particular locality. Need for accurate predictions. It is hardly possible to emphasize our need for accurate prediction of warming patterns to manage the climate change impact that have already landed. We need such predictions not only on an event to event basis but also in order to adapt to the changing regions and the unavoidable harm they are rendering to lives and livelihoods and economies. In some, we will be better served by keeping the global warming patterns in mind when arbitrary threshold lacking in any real scientific basis threaten to sweep of us away. The next article, brumation winter is coming for reptiles. It is an alligator lying still underwater, its snout alone seeking out alive or dead. If this is the situation, there is a third possibility, brumation. This is the name to describe a period dormancy or slowed activity in reptiles, much like hibernation in mammals. It typically occurs during colder months when temperature drop and food becomes scarce. Reptiles enter a state of brumation to conserve energy and survive these adverse environment conditions. During brumation, reptiles may retreat to an underground burrows, rock service, and other areas where temperatures are relatively more stable. Their metabolism slowed significantly, allowing them to go week or even months without eating. This period or reduced activity allows the reptiles to conserve energy and minimize their resources requirement. Researchers have observed instances of brumation in various reptilian species across habitats. Such species include box turtle and painted turtle, which burrow into the mud at the bottom of the ponds or lakes. Snakes may seek refuge in underground dens or caves, while lizards may hide under rocks or within the vegetation. Formation is crucial for reptiles to survive cold climes and endure challenging environmental conditions until they can re-emerge to feed and reproduce in more favorable climes. So friends, this is all for today and we will meet from tomorrow onwards with new news articles from the Hindu newspaper which are relevant for UPSC perspective. So till then keep studying and thank you for listening. Have a good day.